Around 10 million years ago, somewhere in the forests of what is now Africa, a small primate climbed down from its tree as the sun went down. It didn't have a word for what happened next, but it felt it. Something changed in the air. The shadows between the trees stopped being shadows and started being places where things waited. That primate survived. Its children survived. And somewhere in the unbroken chain between that moment and right now, that feeling was passed forward. You are feeling it tonight. You just don't know it yet. Most people think of the fear of the dark as a childhood thing, something you grow out of, something slightly embarrassing to admit to as an adult. Psychologists have a clinical name for the severe version, nyctophobia, and a standard treatment protocol. But the framing is wrong. Calling it a phobia puts it in the same category as a fear of clowns or a fear of flying, something irrational, something the brain invented. And that is not what this is. What this is a threat detection system so old it was already ancient when the first human being stood upright. It does not live in the part of your brain that worries, it lives in the part that keeps you alive before you have time to think. In 2001, psychologists Arne Öhman and Mineka published what became one of the most cited papers in evolutionary psychology. Their argument was this: humans do not learn to fear the dark the way they learn to fear, say, electrical outlets. They arrive with it. The brain has what Öhman and Mineka called a fear module, a set of threat responses that are preloaded, not acquired. Darkness is on that list, not because anyone taught you to be afraid of the dark, because every ancestor who was not afraid of the dark died before they could become your ancestor. This is what biologists call a survival filter, and it runs deeper than you think. Go back to that forest 10 million years ago, before Homo sapiens, before Homo erectus, before any species you would recognize as human. The primates living in the forests of equatorial Africa were prey animals, not apex predators, prey. The things that hunted them, the big cats, the ancestral hyenas, the large raptors, shared a specific adaptation. They could see in the dark. Not metaphorically, literally. Their eyes were built for it. Low light vision, wider pupils, a reflective layer behind the retina that amplified available light. When the sun went down, the balance of power shifted completely. The forest that had been relatively safe for 12 hours became, in the space of a few minutes, a place where the things that wanted to eat you could see perfectly, and you could see almost nothing. The primates that survived were the ones whose bodies understood this before their minds did. In 2011, a research team studying wild chimpanzee behavior in Uganda's Kibale Forest published data that had taken 6 years to collect. What they found was this: chimpanzees across every group they studied showed a consistent and hard behavioral threshold at dusk. Movement dropped, foraging stopped, vocalizations decreased. The animals did not gradually wind down as darkness came. They stopped almost simultaneously at a specific light level. The researchers noted that this threshold corresponded almost exactly with the point at which the forest's large nocturnal predators became active. The chimps weren't responding to darkness. They were responding to what darkness meant. And here is where it gets stranger. The same research team cross-referenced their data with studies of other great ape species: gorillas, orangutan, bonobos. The same threshold appeared in all of them. A consistent, species-wide behavioral shift at the same point in the fading light. Not learned, not cultural, built in, shared across tens of millions of years of separate evolutionary history. The threshold they measured in the chimpanzees was statistically identical to the light level at which modern human cortisol levels begin to rise in darkness exposure studies. Your body is still stopping at the same threshold, 10 million years later, in a world with no large nocturnal predators anywhere near you. Then something happened that changed the equation entirely. Somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million years ago, early humans learned to control fire. And the effect was not just warmth, and not just cooked food, and not just light. The effect was a perimeter. Fire created the first safe zone in the dark, a radius, roughly 5 to 10 meters of illuminated ground, inside which the nocturnal predators would not come. For the first time in tens of millions of years, a primate could exist after dark without being completely blind and completely vulnerable. But the fear didn't go away. It couldn't, because the fire also went out, and the body remembered what darkness meant even when the conscious mind no longer needed to. Anthropologists studying the sleep patterns of contemporary hunter-gatherer societies, the Hadza in Tanzania, the Kungsan in the Kalahari, have found that members of these groups consistently wake during the night, in the hours after the fire has died down, and tend to it. Not because they planned to, not because anyone told them to, because the body, in its sleep, monitors the light level and sounds an alarm when the perimeter shrinks. The behavior is automatic. The fire management is happening partly below the level of conscious decision. You still do a version of this. You simply do not know that is what you are doing. Think about what happens when you wake in the night in a dark room. The specific quality of the alertness, the way your hearing arrives before your vision does, the brief pre-rational scan of the space before you have fully decided to be awake. That is not insomnia. That is not anxiety. That is a 10 million-year-old monitoring system briefly surfacing through sleep to check whether the perimeter is still intact. It checks. It finds electric light or ambient street light or the glow of a standby indicator on a screen. It registers. The threshold has not been crossed, and it lets you go back under. What you feel in the dark is not irrational. It is the most rational thing your body has ever done. It is the response that was correct every night for 10 million years, still running in a world that has changed so fast the response hasn't had time to notice. The small primate that stopped at the edge of the forest as the sun went down survived, and every night since, in an unbroken line of bodies passing the same instruction forward. Something in you has been stopping at that same edge, waiting, listening, checking whether the things that see in the dark are still out there. They aren't, but you are still checking, and you always will be.